So some Jehovah's Witnesses gave me this Bible. This is their Bible. It is the New World Translation. You might not know about that Bible. Maybe you do. There are many differences in this translation of their Bible than a normal one. One is it translates the term Holy Spirit or Holy Ghost into active force. And there's another really important change that we see. First of all, an example will be John 1:1. And we'll come to that later on. Have you ever had an encounter with a Jehovah's Witness? Well, these ideas, at least some of them, are not new. They go back to the 4th century, I guess 3rd century with Arius, because the person we're going to look at today is Athanasius. And Athanasius was born in the late 3rd century and primarily worked in the 4th century. And one of the greatest church fathers that we have, and one of the greatest defenders of orthodoxy that we have today. And so we want to learn about Athanasius. We're going over Ken Sample's book, Classic Christian Thinkers, an Introduction. And this is a great book. We're going to go through it. We're on the 2nd chapter now. First, we had an interview with Ken about why he wrote the book and what the book is really about. And then we had our first chapter overview last time over Irenaeus. So if you haven't seen that, go by and check it out. I will leave a link to that in the description. I'm also making a playlist. You can find that in the playlist as well. Athanasius is an important figure for many reasons. As I mentioned, he was born, he was in the 4th, he mainly lived in the 4th century. He was a theologian as well as an apologist. And he's very well known for the Arian controversy. In fact, this goes into what you might have seen this meme on Facebook about this little kid asking Santa Claus, does he believe in homoousios or homoousios? And the Santa Claus is like, what? And he's like, you're not the real Santa. So that debate goes to the divine nature of Christ. One of the biggest debates in Christian theology that started earlier on in the church with heresies like Arianism, that's very similar to Jehovah's Witness teaching, is whether or not Jesus was actually fully God and fully divine, or whether he was simply a lesser created being, but a created being nonetheless. Almost divine, but not quite in this kind of theology. Well, Athanasius was very important in combating this. And so, born late 3rd century, lived in the 4th century, did all his work in the 4th century. He was an apologist against the Arian controversy, wrote several important books, for example, on the Incarnation and the life of Antony. Antony was a monastic who lived in the desert and was an ascetic. Don't get that confused with aesthetics, like the study of beauty, but an ascetic, A-S-C-E-T-I-C, is somebody who would denounce bodily pleasure and try to seek after some kind of a higher spiritual plane. And so asceticism was a very popular movement in the early church. We still see asceticism around today. So there are several arguments that Athanasius gave for the deity of Christ. Here's one of them. There are several in the book, so go check that out if you want to see more. One of them says only God can save people from sin. Jesus Christ saves people from their sin. Therefore, Jesus Christ is God. So he is defending the orthodox teaching that Jesus is fully divine. You'll have another video or another lecture that I have on that Jesus really claimed to be divine. So I'll put a link to that and an end card to that as well if you want to see that. But this was and is still a very important aspect to Christian theology. What does it mean for Jesus to be fully divine? How is that possible? How does he? It's easy to get into heresy here because you don't want to say, for example, that he's two different persons. That would be what's called Nestorianism. You don't want to say that the divine nature and the human nature are blended somehow or confused. That would also be a problem. We have to walk these fine lines in Christian theology with the incarnation and the Trinity. And so Athanasius, who was this great church leader for many years, and actually was taken out in exile for about 17 years total and over several times, he was a great ecclesiastical leader, and he was a defender of this position that Jesus was, in fact, really God, that only really a really God kind of person, someone who was fully divine, could save people from their sins. And so that's what Jesus had to be. He had to be fully divine in order to save people from their sins. And we see this crop up. If you saw the interview I had with Ken about the book, he said, well, when I talk to Jehovah's Witnesses, I say, have you read Arius? You'd like him. And they would, because they teach the same thing that their scriptures teach. So let's see what their scriptures actually do teach. You may be familiar with this already. So we look at their book, at their translation, the New World Translation, we'll look at John 1:1. And, you know, the regular Bibles, the ones that aren't translated from the Jehovah's Witnesses, say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You'll notice here that it actually says a God. The Jehovah's Witness translation says that Jesus was simply a God and not God. And the reason they say this is because they want to argue that because there's not an article, the word the, in front of the word God there, it should be translated indefinitely, meaning a God. If you're going to go to the store, you have the definite article, we're going to go to the store. Or you can say, I'm going to go to a store, where you have the indefinite article. Well, Jehovah's Witnesses say that because there's not an article, in the word the, in front of the word God there, it should be translated as a God instead of just God. However, this practice, according to that principle, is not followed very often. In fact, if we take their own text and look at verse 6, it says, there came a man who was sent as a representative of God. Big G. This is not simply a God. And you know what? There's no article there. The word the is not in front of this word God. In fact, as we see in Daniel Wallace's book, Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics, he cites R.H. Countess in his book, The Jehovah's Witnesses' New Testament, a critical analysis of the New World Translation of the Christian Greek Scriptures. And he says, in the New Testament, there are 282 occurrences of the anarthrous theos, meaning the word God that appears without the definite article. If it has the definite article, it's called articular because it has the article. If it doesn't have it, it's called anarthrous. So he says there's 282 times where the word God appears without the article or without the word the. At 16 places, New World Translation has either a God, gods, godly. That means 16 out of 282 occurrences mean that they were faithful to their translation principle only 6% of the time. So we are still battling the same battles as Athanasius. We're having the same theological debates in the 21st century as Athanasius had, and that were raging in the 3rd and 4th century. So we can learn from Athanasius and see, well, how did he argue? Why was it important? Why is this doctrine important? So there's a lot to be said about Athanasius. He is a 4th century theologian, apologist who did a lot of things. He taught that Jesus is fully divine, and that he wrote and argued against the Arians, and was in a great way largely credited with fending off the Arian theology and the Arian controversy. He didn't get rid of it completely, as our book by Ken says, but he did a lot to rid that heresy out of the church, and to shape and defend Orthodox teaching. So we can learn from that, from Athanasius. We can learn that when Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking on our door, we can politely, ask them, why. And honestly, most of them aren't going to know Greek enough to be able to answer your questions. I've had several Jehovah's Witnesses come to my house, Mormons, all kind of people. And well, if you point something like this out, first of all, you've got to have probably a Greek New Testament, or you at least can say it. If they'll believe you, then they're probably not going to know how to answer you. So we're not trying to bang them over the head with our theology or whatever, but we want to do something that Greg Kokel says in his book Tactics, and that we're probably not going to convert people on the spot, but we can do something. We can leave a stone in their shoe, as the saying goes. And so what that means is we can leave them something to think about. We can leave them something to think about and ponder about. Well, this guy said, or this lady said, that our principle of interpretation here, or the New World Translation's way of translating the Greek with the word God and without the word "the" in front of it, isn't very consistent. And in verse 6 of that same chapter, just 5 verses down, it violates that very principle. In fact, you see from the Greek text, the book by Wallace, and he's citing, is that we only have about 6% where the word God occurs, and the word is not translated that way, except for 6% of the time. So they're not very consistent, and they seem to really be picking and choosing and being kind of circular and presumptuous with how they go about doing that. So read the book. Go get Ken's book. Hope you read the chapter. We're going to look at Augustine next time. He's going to be a very interesting person. Lots of things to know about Athanasius. We just touched the tip of the iceberg as it goes for the book. Anything we could say about Athanasius, we could spend a lot more time on him. So go check that out. Hope you got something out of that. Hope you learned how to discuss some things with Jehovah's Witnesses. Our discussion with them should be fruitful, not trying to be just simply argumentative or anything. We should discuss with them in gentleness and love and respect and everything, as the scriptures say we should, and just to build bridges and be able to help lead them to Christ and put a stone in their shoe. So like the video if you do like it, and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you guys next time.